Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a topic that impacts absolutely every single one of us, our relationships. Specifically, we're going to uncover how to break out of those incredibly frustrating, gridlocked arguments and dramatically deepen your emotional connection. We're going to do this by looking at some robust psychological research and mastering what's known as the 4 steps of nonviolent communication.
Okay, let's kick things off with a situation I guarantee you have either been in or witnessed. Why do small arguments cause the biggest relationship rifts? Imagine a couple, let's call them Sarah and Mark. Mark leaves a dish in the sink, Sarah snaps, and boom, suddenly they are in a massive blow-up. Why do these seemingly tiny, absolutely insignificant moments suddenly mutate into major rifts? Slamming doors, the icy silent treatment, leaving both people feeling completely misunderstood.
Well, the answer lies in this staggering statistic from renowned relationship researcher Dr. John Gottman. After observing couples for decades in his famous Love Lab, he found that 69% of relationship conflicts are actually perpetual problems, meaning they're based on lasting personality differences or core needs. Think about that for a second. Almost 70% of what you argue about isn't actually solvable in the traditional sense. You are literally never going to fix it because it's just baked into who you and your partner fundamentally are.
All right, Section 1, the power of small moments. Since we can't just problem-solve away all our differences, we have to look at how intimacy is actually built in the everyday micro-moments.
Gottman coined a really brilliant term for these micro-moments. He calls them a bid for connection. A bid is any attempt, big, small, verbal, or completely silent, to engage with another person emotionally. At their absolute core, beneath whatever words or actions are happening, every single bid is essentially asking one profound question. Are you there for me?
And the thing is, these bids do not require grand romantic gestures. They're subtle. Look at this list. They are easily missed everyday actions. A heavy sigh from the couch followed by silence. Sending a funny video while you're at work. Reaching for a hand, asking, hey, what do you think about this? Or just a quick smile across the room. Responding to these doesn't take a master's degree in psychology. It just requires your presence. You can turn toward the bid, you can turn away by ignoring it, or you can turn against it with irritation. How you respond is exactly where nonviolent communication becomes an absolute game changer.
Which brings us to Section 2, why communication breaks down. Let's see what happens when we start missing these crucial little signals.
It is incredibly easy to fall into a classic trap here. Bids are tricky, right? Because they are often poorly timed or wrapped up in irritation. Think back to Sarah and Mark. Mark is scrolling on his phone and Sarah snaps, "You're always on your phone." Now, if Mark only reacts to the surface behavior, the obvious irritation in her voice, he's going to get defensive and fire back. But if he looks deeper, Sarah's underlying bid is actually, "I feel unimportant right now and I really need some reassurance." When we constantly react to the surface and miss that underlying bid, we lose the connection and couples just start to slowly, quietly drift apart.
What a healthy dynamic actually looks like is perfectly captured right here in Gottman's Sound Relationship House. Notice that managing conflict, which sits right there in the middle, it rests entirely on a foundation of trust, fondness, and turning towards those everyday bids. If you haven't built the lower levels of this house by responding to each other in the mundane moments, your attempts to manage conflict will simply collapse.
So moving to Section 3, 4 steps of NVC, or nonviolent communication. How do we actually build that foundation and express our underlying needs safely?
Psychologist Marshall Rosenberg developed these 4 powerful steps to shift us from reacting defensively to exploring what is really going on inside. Let's break these down. Step 1 is observation. This is describing what you see or hear strictly as a fact, without any judgment, kind of like a video camera. Instead of saying, "You're so messy," you say, "I see dishes on the counter." Step 2 is feelings, sharing your actual emotional response, not a thought disguised as a feeling. So try, "I feel overwhelmed," rather than, "I feel like you don't care." Step 3 is needs. Identify the core human need, like respect, connection, safety, that is driving that feeling. And finally, step 4 is the request, asking for a clear, specific, and collaborative action rather than making a rigid demand. For example, would you be willing to load the dishwasher before bed?
Let's see this in action, because you can really feel the difference. A typical blaming statement sounds like, "You never listen to me, you're always on your phone." Instantly, the other person is on trial. But listen to the NVC approach. When you look at your phone while I'm speaking, clean observation. I feel unheard, the feeling. I need to feel valued, the core need. Would you put it down when we talk?
a clear, collaborative request. Look at how that tone completely changes. It moves from an attack to vulnerability, which actually opens the door for your partner to listen instead of just putting up their shields.
Section 4. Validation over problem solving. Because as we learn to make these requests, we also have to learn how to properly receive them.
Here is a golden rule for relationships. Empathic connection absolutely must come before intervention. Our brains naturally want to solve problems to reduce stress. It's just how we're wired. But when your partner is expressing a feeling, what they really need first is validation that their emotional experience makes sense. If you jump straight into fix-it mode, they are going to feel dismissed. You have to connect with the emotion before you even try to correct the situation.
But we do have to be a little careful here, because there's a vital difference between healthy support and enabling. True support means listening, validating their feelings, and respecting their autonomy to handle their own stuff. Enabling, on the other hand, is when you take over responsibility for their mood or you try to force solutions just to avoid your own discomfort. Being a supportive partner doesn't mean becoming their therapist. It means holding space for them while keeping your own boundaries intact.
Section 5. Rebuilding lasting relationship trust. What if the trust is already worn down from missed bids or poor communication? Let's look at how to rebuild it.
For couples recovering from a significant breach of trust, Gottman's research gives us this really solid framework: atone, attune, and attach. First, the partner who caused harm has to fully atone. That means absolute responsibility, zero excuses. And NVC is crucial here, because phrasing the apology properly prevents this phase from turning right back into a fight. Next, the couple must attune. This is rebuilding the connection by processing difficult emotions together with a lot of empathy. Finally, they attach, recommitting to a shared future with new agreements.
But trust isn't just about recovering from the big stuff, it's an everyday practice. And for everyday trust building, this simple 5 to 10 minute daily check-in is incredible. It works like this. First, share one thing that stressed you out today, specifically something outside the relationship. Second, share one thing you are grateful for. And third, share one thing you need from tomorrow. The listener doesn't fix anything here, they just validate. Doing this creates such amazing predictability and proves to your partner that you will listen without judgment.
Now, before we finish, it's important to remember that effective NVC and partner support actually start from within. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? Self-compassion provides the emotional resilience you need to be kind to your partner. It prevents ego defensiveness. When you don't rely entirely on your partner to meet all of your needs, you actually have way more emotional resources and patience to give back to them.
I want to leave you with this beautifully profound quote by David Augsburger that really just sums up everything we've talked about today. He says, "Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable." Let that sink in. Validating a partner's feelings, turning toward their subtle bids, and using NVC to really hear their needs, these are the ultimate acts of connection. To truly hear someone is to love them.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one thought to carry with you. Your relationship isn't built on your anniversary. It's being built right now, today, in the most mundane moments. So how are you going to respond to your partner's very next bid for connection? Will you fall back into defensive habits, or will you use the steps of NVC to truly connect? The choice is absolutely yours. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.